We are back again in the world of Breath of the Wild, a huge open world with all kinds of mysteries, weird creatures and crazy phenomenon. And today we will look at a number of crazy claims about this game to see whether they are true or false. For example, can you start forest fires? Are you able to kill a sand seal? And what happens when you parry a wind slash? Well, let's find out. Now, after messing around with the flying guardians in the previous episode, I decided to test a thing that made a lot of sense to me. These propellers that are spinning around must deal damage when you touch them, right? I mean, it only makes sense. But do they? Well, I decided to fly into them to see what would happen. But as you can see, they don't do anything. Nintendo didn't give them any form of collision, so you just phase through them like they are not even there. Which is a bit anticlimactic to say the least. So I guess you don't have to worry about these. All you need to think about is the deadly laser that is flying right at your face. Now, after flying through these things, I had to test something else that a friendly neighborhood red lizard suggested in the comments. He claimed that if you take out 2 propellers, they will no longer be able to fly, which sounded quite interesting, and it made sense as well. 2/3 of them are gone, so of course he will run into trouble. But did Nintendo think about this? Or will the Guardian be fine? Well, I opened fire on one using bomb arrows, and specifically targeted the propellers to get rid of 2 of them. And as you can see, I succeeded. But he was still able to fly. Sure, it was tough, but he didn't go down slowly or crashed. So apparently just 1 is enough to remain in the air, which is impressive. But that does mean that the claim made in this comment is false. In the previous video, we covered a claim that a two-handed weapon can be used to deflect the laser of a guardian, and now this claim is back once again. However, it has been tweaked a tiny bit. Instead of just using any two-handed weapon, I had to use a wind cleaver, because apparently the wind slash that it creates deflects lasers. However, I was very skeptical of this to say the least, but still I had to actually test it, which was a bit annoying, because man, the timing of this is weird and hard to get down. But I did succeed once. However, as you can see, it didn't save me from the deadly laser that was heading my way. So yeah, again, this whole claim is false, and I already expected this. In the past, I said that riding a deer is certainly possible, and we saw that the same goes for bears that roam Hyrule. But what about boars? I mean, in older titles like Twilight Princess, you could ride them. So is this the case in Breath of the Wild as well? Well, who knows? But Carrie wanted me to figure out if it is truly possible. So I went to work and decided to sneak up to one that can be found on the Great Plateau. With ease, I was able to get behind it. However, the game didn't give me any option to ride on top of the creature. So as far as I can see, a boar can't really be mounted. It's not like a deer, bear or horse, who are much bigger and more powerful, allowing them to carry a Hylian, which means that this claim is just false. Out of all the enemies Nintendo has ever created, I think that the Guardians are one of the best. They are terrifying to say the least. Well, until you become super powerful in the game. Now, most people who want to take them down target the legs. As soon as those are gone, they can't really move, making them an easy target. However, Sarah said that you can also ride on top of them. And to an extent, you can even pilot Guardians by standing on their head and moving into the direction you want them to go to. This sounded fascinating, and I had never actually tried this. So I found myself a Guardian and climbed on top. Now, as expected, the Guardian freaked out. He had no idea where I was, but I was somewhere close. And moving around on top of him made the Guardian even more chaotic. And just like the commenter claimed, I was able to sort of control it. But I would call it anything but easy. Still, it confirms that the claim is true. You can stand on top of them and even sort of pilot them around. A normal Guardian has 3 weaknesses: the legs, eye, and hole in the center at the very bottom of the robot. However, this only goes for the stalkers, the Guardians that walk around. Some of these weaknesses aren't present in the flying variety, but still hitting the eye and propellers instead of legs does work really well. But what about the center? Unlike the stalker, this version has sealed off this weakness. But does that mean that they are immune? Well, I hit it with an arrow to see what would happen. Now, as you can see, the Guardian does have a strong reaction, but by the looks of it, the attack doesn't deal extra damage. However, it does severely destabilize the robot. Just look at it swinging around. So I would say that this claim is plausible at best. Sure, it has an effect that's different, but it isn't a true weak spot. In the previous video, I tackled a well-known claim that I deemed to be false. As far as I could see, it just didn't work. However, many of you in the comments disputed my findings and told me to give it another shot. So I decided to do just that. Can you launch items high up into the air using the Cryonis rune? And this time I used shallow water like Zonai Engineer suggested. And after some messing around, I could see that this trick does work. I'm just not that good at it. Overall, using shallow water made it a lot easier. And if you look online, you can see loads of other people pulling off this trick as well. So clearly I was wrong and all of you were right, because this claim is 100% true. Tears of the Kingdom introduced a lot of new things to the same world from Breath of the Wild, and almost all of them were a good idea. Well, except stuff like the depths and some of the small puzzles, because man oh man, all of it could become rather repetitive. However, I wondered if some of the things from that game could also be replicated in Breath of the Wild. For example, can you create ice sheets just like you could in Tears of the Kingdom? Well, I found a body of water and tried to make some, but no matter what I used, a wand or arrows, no ice sheets were created. So it seems like this item is not even in the game and can't be created. Sure, it does work with lava when you use water, but water itself can clearly not be frozen. So yeah, this doesn't work. Bees suck. Anytime you try to get your hands on a honeycomb, they will come and bother you. Sure, they deal very little damage, but they are rather annoying, and usually swinging at them with any kind of weapon helps. However, according to Gary Williams, there's another solution for this problem. He suggested using a bomb on the hive. This will get rid of them instantly, and you can just collect the honey. Now, this sounded like a ridiculous solution, completely overkill, but still, I grabbed a bomb arrow and shot a hive. As expected, everything caught on fire, and the bees were dealt with. So yeah, it does work, even though the honey almost went up into flames, and I took more damage from the fire than the bees could ever dish out. Clearly, it works, but I wouldn't call it a great idea. We all know that the Nintendo Switch isn't too powerful, which causes many of the critters seen in the game to disappear pretty quickly. As soon as you see them, you might have 5 seconds to catch it, because otherwise it will just vanish out of nowhere. But is there a way to stop them? For example, the frogs seen in the game. Can these be shot or even frozen so they don't run away? Well, I grabbed a bow and tried it. Now, as you can see, you can shoot them and they will die. And freezing is also incredibly effective. So I think that next time I see one of these critters roam the world of Hyrule, I will just use deadly force immediately instead of running around like a fool. Parrying attacks can be super useful. It allows you to avoid damage while leaving an enemy open for a counter. Now, most attacks can be parried, for example, a strike from a sword or a spear. But what about some of the more unique attacks? Like the wind slashes created by the wind cleavers used by the Yiga Blade Masters. Can those be parried? And if so, what happens? Well, when I was running around the world and encountered one of these evil Sheikahs, I readied my shield to see what would happen. And as you can see, you can parry them, but that's kind of it. It doesn't deflect the attack back or stuns the enemy. So yeah, this is possible, but it doesn't really do anything. So you're better off dodging and going into Flurry Rush. Alright, a wind slash doesn't work too well, but what about an arrow? Maybe these will fly back to the enemy, or drop on the ground in front of you when you parry them. If you can parry them at least, because who knows? So I went into the world and found an enemy firing arrows that I could parry with my shield. And I gotta say, getting the timing down for this one was pretty hard. As you can see, I failed many times, but in the end I was able to parry a couple of them, which shocked the Lizalfos that I was fighting. But this is all. The arrows didn't fly back towards my enemy, and it didn't really leave them open for a counter, briefly at best. So again, it looks like it's a bit of a flex on the enemy you're fighting, however, that's really it. One of the most heinous crimes you can commit in Breath of the Wild is killing the one companion you have in the game, your horse. Sometimes you just mess up and this happens. And doing this really angers the horse god Melania. Aside from that, it's also quite expensive to bring one back, 1,000 rupees in total. However, all of this made me think, can you kill any of the other mounts in the game? You can take out a horse, bear, and even deer. But what about the sand seals seen in Gerudo Desert? Well, I'd never seen them die, so I decided to try and kill one of them to see if it was even possible. But no matter how often I shot them or hit them with the Master Sword, they just wouldn't go down. At best, they would flee. So as far as I can see, these creatures cannot be killed by Link, which makes it the odd one out that is destined for immortality. Now, okay, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I have one more parry-related thing that I want to test, and it involves the Lizalfos. Because after messing around with arrows and wind slashes, I had to find out if you could parry the water attack from the Lizalfos. And since I was close by already when I was testing if arrows could be parried, I decided to try this one as well. Now, as you can see, there's a bit of a pattern with all of these. Yes, you can parry water, arrows, and wind slashes, but it isn't really useful. The enemy isn't really stunned, you can't counter, and it doesn't activate Flurry Rush, so you just stand there after pulling off a cool move. So clearly, testing any more parry-related claims isn't really worth it. Now this next one is straight up evil, because I wanted to see if I could commit a crime in the game, starting a forest fire. If you light a bunch of grass, will the plants and trees around it go up in flames as well, leading to escalation? Well, I pulled out a fire wand and unleashed chaos to see if it would go on and on. But as you can see, at some point, it fizzles out. The tree won't catch fire, and at some point there's no grass left. So it all just ends, which might actually be a good thing. The original Nintendo Switch isn't that powerful, so a massive fire would lead to huge slowdowns and potentially even a crash. But on the other hand, it's also a bit sad that this is impossible. The game is super realistic in many ways, but Nintendo won't allow it all to escalate too far. Now those were all the myths and claims we had for this video, but don't worry, I made many other videos like this, so be sure to check them out. Aside from that, leave your suggestions down below in the comments and you might be featured in a future video. And don't forget, be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next upload.